There are moments in life when everything you know, everything you've built, everything you believe about justice and truth collapses in a single breath. And when that happens, when the world turns its back and the walls close in, that's when you discover what faith truly means. This is the story of a woman who walked to the very edge of death, abandoned by everyone except God himself. Laura Bennett was 41 years old when her life ended. Not in the way you might think, but in the way that matters most, when your name becomes synonymous with something you never did, when your hands, trained to heal, are called instruments of murder. She had been a nurse for 17 years at Phoenix General Hospital, known for her gentle touch with elderly patients, for staying late when families needed someone to sit with them, for remembering birthdays and favorite songs. Her daughter Grace, just 14, used to brag to her friends that her mum was a real-life angel. But angels, it turns out, can fall. It happened on a Tuesday night in October. Michael Harrow, a real estate developer worth millions, was admitted with complications from a routine surgery. He was the kind of man who believed money bought respect, who screamed at nurses like they were servants, who threatened lawsuits when his water wasn't cold enough. That evening, he had reduced a young nursing assistant to tears, called Laura incompetent when she tried to adjust his IV, and demanded to speak to administrators about the disgraceful state of care. 3 hours later, he was dead. The autopsy showed a massive overdose of sedative in his system. The syringe with Laura's fingerprints was found in the medical waste. Security footage showed her entering his room at 11:47 p.m., just minutes before the cardiac monitors flatlined. The prosecution painted a portrait of a woman pushed to her limit, a nurse tired of abuse who snapped and made a fatal decision. They called it premeditated murder. The defense called it circumstantial. The jury took 4 hours to decide Laura's fate. Guilty. The judge, a stern woman with steel-grey hair, looked at Laura with something almost like pity when she pronounced the sentence. Death by lethal injection. Laura didn't cry. She simply whispered, so quiet the court reporter almost missed it, "I didn't do this. I would never do this." But her whisper was drowned out by the sound of the gavel, by the gasps from the gallery, by Grace's scream as security held her back. 3 years. 3 years of appeals denied, of lawyers who stopped returning calls, of Grace's face growing older through the scratched plexiglass of the visiting room. 3 years of a 6-by-8-foot cell that smelled of disinfectant and despair, of fluorescent lights that never fully turned off, of women who screamed in the night and guards who looked through you like you were already gone. Laura stopped counting days. She started counting the letters from Grace instead. Grace wrote every week without fail. She wrote about school, about the neighbor's dog, about how she was learning to cook the pasta dish Laura used to make. She wrote about praying every night, about lighting candles at church, about believing with her whole heart that the truth would come out. In one letter, Grace tucked a blue rosary, the beads smooth and cool. "Keep this close, Mum," she wrote in her careful teenage handwriting, "so you don't forget that God still sees the truth even when nobody else does." Laura kept that rosary under her pillow. On the worst nights, when the fear crept in like fog, when she imagined the gurney and the needles and Grace growing up without her, she would hold those beads so tight they left marks on her palms. And if you're listening to this story right now, and you believe that God hasn't forgotten those who cry out to him in their darkest hour, I want to ask you something. Take a moment and hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because these stories, these testimonies of God's faithfulness, they need to reach people who are losing hope right now. Your simple action of faith helps spread light into someone's darkness. Now let me tell you what happened next. The execution date was set for November 14th. 3 days before, Laura's last appeal was denied by the state Supreme Court. Her lawyer, a tired man with kind eyes who had worked pro bono for 2 years, came to tell her in person. He sat across from her in the visiting room and cried harder than she did. "I'm so sorry," he kept saying. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." Laura reached across the table and took his hand. "You tried," she said. "That matters." That night, lying on her bunk in the silence between lights out and dawn, Laura realized she had been praying wrong. For 3 years, she had begged God for justice, for vindication, for someone to believe her. She had bargained and pleaded and demanded to know why this was happening to an innocent woman. But now, with 72 hours left, she stopped asking for explanations. She just asked for peace. The next day, she made a request that surprised even the hardened death row guards. "I want to go to the chapel," she told the warden. "I need to speak with Jesus." The warden, a man who had overseen 14 executions and learned not to deny final requests, arranged it. The chapel was small and plain, tucked in a corner of the prison most inmates never saw. Wooden pews that seated maybe 20 people, walls painted institutional beige, and a large wooden crucifix mounted on the front wall. Jesus hung there suffering and serene, his eyes cast upward. Laura walked down the short aisle, her chains clinking with each step, a guard waiting by the door. She sat in the front pew and looked up at that face, and for the first time since the verdict, since the nightmare began, Laura Bennett truly wept. Not the silent tears she had shed in her cell, but deep, body-shaking sobs that came from a place beyond words. She didn't pray eloquently. She didn't quote scripture. She just said, "I can't carry this anymore, I can't. If this is the end, please, please give me peace. Don't let grace remember me afraid." The guard shifted uncomfortably by the door. The chapel was utterly silent except for Laura's crying. And then, slowly, something shifted. The air felt different, warmer somehow, like invisible arms wrapping around her shoulders. Laura's breathing slowed. The tears stopped, and she felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years, the absolute certainty that she was not alone. The night before the execution, Laura couldn't sleep, not because of fear, though fear was there, coiled in her stomach like a living thing, but because she felt alert, expectant, like something was about to happen. The cell block was quiet, just the occasional cough or whisper from other cells, the fluorescent hum of lights. Laura sat on her bunk, the blue rosary wrapped around her fingers, and prayed the only prayer left, "Your will, not mine." And then the light came. It started as a glow, soft and golden, seeping into her cell like dawn breaking, though it was 2 in the morning and there were no windows. The light didn't come from the corridor or the ceiling fixture. It came from everywhere and nowhere, warm and gentle, pushing back the shadows. Laura's breath caught. The air itself felt different, charged with something holy, something beyond words. And the temperature changed. The perpetual chill of concrete and metal giving way to warmth, as if someone had draped an invisible blanket over her. She looked up and saw him. In the corner of her cell, where there should have been only wall and shadow, stood a man. He was dressed in white, simple and radiant, his face peaceful in a way that made her heart ache. His eyes, when they met hers, held such compassion, such deep knowing, that Laura couldn't breathe. She knew instantly and completely who he was. This was Jesus. Not a vision, not a dream, but a presence so real she could have reached out and touched the hem of his robe. He didn't speak with words, but Laura heard him anyway, the message written directly on her heart in letters of fire and grace. "You are not alone. You have never been alone. The truth is coming." Tears streamed down her face, but these were different tears, clean and healing. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to ask him questions, but her voice wouldn't come. It didn't matter. He knew. He had always known. And then the scent came. Roses. Not the faint suggestion of flowers, but a powerful, intoxicating fragrance that filled every inch of the cell. Rich and sweet and utterly impossible. There were no roses in the prison, no windows for scent to drift through, no explanation in the natural world, just the overwhelming presence of beauty in the midst of death row. Laura didn't know how long he stayed. Time felt suspended, elastic, meaningless, but when the light finally faded and she was alone again in her cell, everything had changed. The fear was gone. In its place was a certainty deeper than bone. She would see Grace again. Morning came. Guards arrived to transport her to the execution chamber. The chaplain walked beside her, reading Psalm 23 in a shaky voice. The warden waited in the hallway, his face grim, hands clasped behind his back. Protocol dictated that Laura should be given a final meal, a final statement, a final chance to see loved ones. Grace was waiting in a room nearby, her face pale and tear-stained. But before any of that could happen, before Laura took another step toward that final room, a guard came running down the corridor with a phone in his hand. "Wait," he shouted. "Stop, don't move her." The warden grabbed the phone. Laura watched his face change, watched disbelief and shock, and something like relief flash across his features. He looked at Laura, really looked at her, and said 3 words that made the world tilt. "There's been a confession." Rebecca Harrow, the widow of the man Laura was convicted of killing, had walked into Phoenix Police Department at 6:30 that morning and confessed to murdering her husband. She brought evidence, recordings, bank statements, showing her careful planning to inherit his estate alone. She had administered the fatal dose of sedative herself, wearing gloves, using a syringe she had prepared in advance. She had placed the syringe in the waste bin Laura used, knowing her fingerprints would be on similar syringes from earlier in the shift. She had created the perfect frame, and she had lived with it for 3 years until the night before she said she couldn't breathe. She described waking up choking, unable to draw air, a weight crushing her chest. She described seeing her husband's face in her bedroom, accusing her. And she described in her confession the overwhelming certainty that if she let an innocent woman die, she herself would never escape the judgment waiting for her. The case was reopened immediately. The execution was halted. Within days, Laura Bennett's conviction was overturned. And 8 days after she had stood in that chapel, weeping before the crucifix, 8 days after Jesus appeared in her cell, Laura walked out of the prison gates into the sunlight as a free woman. Grace was waiting outside. When Laura saw her daughter standing by the fence with tears streaming down her face, she broke into a run. The embrace was everything, a collision of grief and joy and relief, 3 years of stolen hugs compressed into one moment. Grace was taller now, nearly as tall as Laura, but she buried her face in her mother's shoulder and sobbed like a child. "I knew," she kept saying, "I knew God would save you. I knew." Starting over is never simple. Laura found a small apartment on the east side of Phoenix, 2 bedrooms with windows that actually opened, sunlight that felt like a miracle every morning. She couldn't work as a nurse anymore. The license revoked, the stigma too heavy. She took a job at a community center, helping coordinate meal programs for seniors. The pay was modest, but the work felt right. Some nights were hard. She would wake at 2 a.m. in a panic, convinced she was back in the cell, that the confession had been a dream. Grace would hear her mother crying and come sleep in her room, just lying beside her in the dark until the fear passed. They went to therapy together, learning how to name the trauma, how to let it exist without letting it consume them. The blue rosary stayed with Laura always, sometimes in her pocket, sometimes around her wrist. It reminded her that even when the world screams lies, God whispers truth. 6 months after her release, on a spring afternoon, Laura and Grace took a walk in Encanto Park. The desert had bloomed after winter rains, and the world felt scrubbed clean and new. They passed a rose garden, the bushes heavy with flowers in every shade of pink and red and white. Laura stopped walking. The scent hit her like a wave, exactly the same as that impossible fragrance in her cell, the night before her scheduled execution. She closed her eyes and breathed deep, letting the memories wash over her. The light, the presence, the certainty of not being alone. Grace watched her mother's face, saw something peaceful settle there. "You okay, Mom?" she asked softly. Laura opened her eyes and smiled, a real smile that reached all the way to her heart. "Yeah, baby, I'm okay." She touched the rosary on her wrist. "Better than okay, because I know now, really know, that He never left me, not for a single second." They walked on through the garden, mother and daughter, 2 survivors bound together by love and faith and a miracle that defied explanation. And Laura understood finally that sometimes God's greatest rescues come not when we demand them, but when we surrender to His timing, when we choose trust over terror, when we believe even in the valley of the shadow of death. Because the truth always comes to light. Sometimes it comes through lawyers and evidence and human justice, and sometimes, when the world has given up and the darkness feels absolute, it comes through a visitation in a prison cell, through the scent of roses where no roses grow, through a love that reaches past bars and walls and death sentences to say, "I see you, I know you, and you are mine." If this story touched your heart, If you've experienced God's intervention in your own life, I want to hear from you. Share your miracle in the comments below. Tell us how God showed up when everything seemed impossible, because your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And please, subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss these stories of faith and redemption. We're building a community of believers here, people who know that miracles didn't stop 2,000 years ago. They're happening right now, in hospital rooms and courtrooms and prison cells, wherever someone cries out to the God who hears. May His peace guard your heart today and always, and may you never forget that even in your darkest hour, you are never ever alone. God bless you.